Thank you very much. My name is Patricia Nauman. I'm the Executive Director of Metro Cities, and I am at the state capitol, so my background's probably a little different than usual. And I hope I'm not too wobbly here, but I'm sort of in between meetings. But want to thank everybody for being here. This is the second in a series of 3 meetings that are addressing the foundations of regional planning and local planning and how they work together. We had the first session, I think 4 weeks ago today. This is the second of the 3. And these are, of course, open to all city officials and staff. They're really meant to be very foundational and hopefully informational for all of you. And I think with that, I will introduce Angela Torres and Lisa Barajas of the Metropolitan Council, who are going to present today. And I think if you have questions, perhaps maybe put those in the chat. And I think last time we had addressed questions maybe more after the presentation. We'll leave a few minutes for that. So I'll turn it over to who is going to start. Looks like you might be starting, Angela. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Hi, everybody. I am Angela Torres. I'm the senior manager of local planning assistance at the Metropolitan Council. Lisa Barajas, who is also here, is the executive director of community development at the Metropolitan Council and will actually be starting. However, I don't think I shared my screen quite right.
You maybe just want to present it in presentation mode. While she's pulling that up, I'm Lisa Barajas. I'm the executive director of community development, and I'll get us going here today. As Angela's pulling up our slides, today's session provides an overview of local comprehensive planning and how it fits within the broader regional planning framework. Today, you'll learn and explore how forecasts, community designations, regional system plans, and policy requirements intersect with local visioning and land use planning. The session will highlight how comprehensive plans guide growth, infrastructure decisions, and community priorities while aligning with regional expectations. So today you'll learn and gain clarity on the connections between regional goals and local strategies that support resilient, well-planned communities. And I just wanted to, before we continue, just want to thank Patty and Metro Cities for the partnership and helping us to bring this information to you all. And we're excited for kicking off the local planning process with you all, as well as our partnership and continued work with Metro Cities to ensure that we are bringing enough information or more information than you need actually and making it accessible to you as we can. Next slide, please. So this was originally a 3-part series that we had planned with Metro Cities, our Foundation of Regional Planning series. And more recently, you'll see it's now a 4-part series. We are adding an additional item in June that digs in a little bit deeper into understanding the land use review process that the Metropolitan Council uses when reviewing local comprehensive plans. In May, I'm working backwards from the bottom to the top of the slide. In May, we will have a deeper dive into the technical assistance programs that the Metropolitan Council is making available to support your local planning processes. Today we're on the April 9th meeting, and previously we, in March, presented that on the foundations of regional planning, what we see as trends in the region as we look forward to 2050. So today we're making that connection to that local plan. Next slide, please. So for those of you who were able to attend in our last month presentation or have seen any of us present on local planning recently, you'll recognize this and will come to see this cycle frequently throughout the planning process. But it really just helps to ground us in the statutory requirements around the 10-year planning cycle and what stage we are at. Local comprehensive planning updates are part of that process. That would be what is labeled, I think, number 6 on the left-hand side at about between the 9 and 12 o'clock hour there for you. And that number 5 element there is where we are at today in supporting developing those guides and trainings and continuing to roll out resources to help in that local planning process. Next slide, please. And before we dig into that, I just want to refer back to some additional foundational elements. More recently, the Metropolitan Council issued system statements, which is essentially a notice that the council has adopted new regional plans or amendments to their plans, and notifying local governments. We are required under the law to do this under the Metropolitan Land Planning Act to notify directly each and every local government within the Twin Cities metro area about how our regional plans impact their community specifically. So you don't have to try to discern it yourself. So these system statements are that communication that we provide every 10 years about that update to the regional plan. It will include things like a general description of our regional plan and each of the system plans, as well as specifics to your community, forecasted growth, development expectations, and key changes to our regional plans that impact you in particular. Each of these are customized for every single local government, all 188 cities, townships, and counties in the metro area, and it details those specific system plan impacts for each municipality. That includes things as specific as where we might be building a lift station or extension of an interceptor line or new regional trails as examples of that. So very specific to that. All of this information is also available on our website in both the system statement itself, as well as in community profiles, which we'll talk a little bit, or community pages, which we'll talk a little bit about later in this slide presentation. Next, I'll just jump into more specifics around comprehensive plans themselves. So these foundational planning elements about the local plan. Next slide. For some folks on our call, I know this won't be your first go around, and for others, this might be your first time in developing a local comprehensive plan. So consider this either new or a refresh, whatever meets your needs today. But comprehensive plans are a really important part of local government operations. They play an important role in the work that cities, counties, townships do every single day. They define and set that community's vision, guide growth and development within your community, protect, including areas that you might not want to have development or you might want to set aside for other purposes. Your local plan also identifies key issues and strategies that are important to your community and how to address them. It can also provide the reasoning or rationale for public facilities, for your budgets, and also serve as a guide for local decision making. We know a lot of decisions that happen around whether or not a certain development should occur or whether or not you have the capacity to do something in an area is really all defined within your local plan. That plan then leads to implementation actions that your staff or others in partnerships help you to carry out. As well as result in potential changes in your official controls or using just your existing official controls to implement your comprehensive plan. Those controls include things like your zoning ordinances, your subdivision, your capital improvements, among others. And implementation actions can be everything from what your department might do, new programs you might stand up, for example, around housing programs, or other studies that you might undertake in order to better understand an issue that was raised during your planning process and to provide clear direction and guidance about what your city may want to do about that. Next slide, please. Within the Metropolitan Land Planning Act, there are very specifically defined plan elements that every plan within the metro area must include within their comprehensive plan. And that's what you're going to see on this slide today. There are several foundational elements, such as local policies and objectives consistent with regional plans, including and acknowledging the community designation that is set within Imagine 2050, and planning for growth as identified in regional forecasts for population, households, and employment. Land use requirements include identifying existing land and water resources, planning for future land uses, and staging out those land uses in 10-year planning increments, completing a housing plan and planning for special resources like historic preservation, solar access, and other natural resources. The public facility sections reflect requirements related to the council's system plans of transportation, water resources, which includes wastewater, surface water, and water supply planning, and regional parks and local parks and trails. Implementation is also a required element for local comprehensive plans. Implementation requirements include identifying necessary revisions to local ordinances, identifying capital improvement plans, and housing implementation programs. Minnesota statutes require communities to address certain topic areas or plan elements in their comprehensive plan. And that includes all of these elements: land use, transportation, water, parks and trails, housing, and plan implementation. And the council might also identify additional plan elements of regional importance that communities are encouraged but not required to incorporate into local plans. For example, in the last round, and certainly in this cycle, the Thrive MSP 2040 and Imagine 2050 both encourage and support economic development or economic competitiveness as optional plan elements, but not required. Some requirements will be in this cycle, however, will be new resulting from changes in our statutes, while other elements, while still required and carried forward from previous cycles, may be refined based on updated regional policies and feedback that we've heard from previous planning cycles about adding clarity or things not working the way as intended. So the council's local planning handbook, which we'll talk a bit about later in this presentation, includes sections for each of these plan elements that outlines those minimum requirements specific to your community and optional elements, as well as connects you to resources to help complete and implement your comprehensive plan. Next slide, please. So to dig in a little bit deeper, I mentioned community designations earlier. Regional land use policies that are in Imagine 2050 are framed around community characteristics of community, character common among them. These form the basis for our community designations. These designations work in concert with land use policies to guide growth in areas with urban infrastructure, such as wastewater services, to establish distinct land use policies and density expectations, to protect agricultural land and natural amenities, and outline strategies to meet the region's forecasted growth. Community designations are further used to plan and implement policies at the local level. Each community in the region is designated with a specific community designation, and that was based on whether or not you receive wastewater services, regional wastewater services in particular, planned residential densities as defined in the 2040 comprehensive plans, the age of the existing housing stock, which is a proxy for age of infrastructure and general development patterns within a community, and then intersection density, intersections of your road network, so, which is a proxy for the connectivity, urban form, and accessibility within the community. Some of these criteria were carried forward as base criteria from Thrive MSP 2040, but updated with updated data for Imagine 2050, while planned residential densities is a new criteria that was incorporated as part of the Imagine 2050 planning process. Next slide, please. At the start of the decennial planning cycle, after we receive census data from the U.S. government, the council conducts a major update of region and local level forecasts. But we start at that regional scale, which is why you see that first on the slide. The forecasts identify when, where, and how much growth is expected in the region over the next 30 years. It looks at growth in 3 areas: population, households, and jobs. After finalizing those regional forecasts, the council allocates these numbers to cities and townships within the region to demonstrate the geographic pattern of expected growth. The council released these local forecasts to local governments in this planning cycle through a couple of different stages: preliminary review, additional follow-up and conversation, and then through a public comment period as part of this planning process. Local forecasts really set the stage and are a core element to how the council plans for its regional system investments, but also sets the stage for local communities on how much growth they need to plan for in their next comprehensive plan. Next slide, please. Right. As part of that, digging a little bit deeper for just about everyone on the call, if you are connected to the regional wastewater system, you may see some differences in your forecast and as broken down by sewered forecast and unsewered forecast. This is going to be particularly true for communities who are maybe in that suburban edge category, or maybe have components of their city that are not currently served or maybe plan to be served in the future. Sorry, could you go back a slide? I wanted to pause while I was coughing, so it wasn't too loud in there for you. Not everybody will see this, though. Some communities are fully served and may not have any areas that are unserved. This is what you will see both in your system statement and on your community page of the local planning handbook. Just is an area as a starting point for planning. These numbers may change and may be staged as you dig in deeper to your local planning process, as you're doing the capital improvement planning or your wastewater planning, or even responding to changes in the marketplace, the council sees these as a starting point for continued planning work that can be adjusted as conditions change for you and as you dig in deeper to your planning process. Next slide, please. Going a little bit further, related to the community designations, the council also sets density expectations that are community-wide by community designation. Minimum density expectations are used to implement and ensure that regional wastewater services are efficient and planned for and can support forecasted growth with a certain intensity of development that makes the provision of those services cost-effective and efficient, as well as achieving other regional goals of the council and directives within statute. You'll see the minimum density is 3 units per acre in the developing or in the rural service area communities, but that increases going into the metropolitan urban service area communities. So as new areas of the developing edge are brought into the MUSA or greenfield development, those new developments have to average out overall for your community, all of that forecasted growth, to a minimum of at least 3.5 units per acre across the community. Each development on its own does not need to be at that minimum density level, but across the community, the average should be meeting those minimum density expectations. And you'll see that changes by community designation for suburban edge to suburban, urban edge to urban. In rural service areas, you'll see that is different. We're looking at maximum densities in those areas because we're trying to limit the need for additional urban services. And certainly to prevent the expansion of services where they were not previously planned for. Next slide, please. Another area that cities need to be considering is how they plan for land guided for affordable housing. Within your system statement and on your community page, if you have sewered residential growth, and growth being an important part of that, you will have an allocation of the region's need for affordable housing for the next 10 years. So that's between 2031 and 2040. Excuse me. So, per the Metropolitan Land Planning Act, local governments that have this future need are required to provide a sufficient amount of land, of residential land guided at a minimum density high enough to support the total number of affordable units that are needed for your community. So what does that mean? It means that there must be enough acres of residential land that is expected to develop or redevelop in that 2031 to 2040 decade that has a minimum density of 10 units an acre that could support the total number of allocated units for your community. You'll see on the screen here that we have both that's two options. So I just described option one. We also have a second option for local governments that would like to split up their allocation by affordability band and guide land at a minimum density of 12 units an acre to meet the total units in their 30% area median income band. That's the lowest affordability level out of those affordability bands, to meet those total units in that band, and 8 for the remaining units of affordability that they have. Different units of government have different amounts, and the allocation among them is really dependent on your existing housing stock and what's available within your community already. So this may or may not be an option that works for you. At any rate, and in any of these cases, our staff are always happy to talk through with you what that might mean for your community. Next slide, please. And then for those of you who have transit service and the different modes that you see on the screen here, you can also see that there are expectations for planning for growth around forecasted growth within those station areas, depending on the mode that you have. We have additional guidance here too, depending on what stage of development your transit mode is in, if you're early in the process, and when these density requirements go into effect. If you have existing service, these absolutely are in effect, but we're happy to talk through what that means more with you too, if you're at a different stage of planning, or that transit line is in a different stage of planning for you. And then defining what that station area looks like. I know a lot of communities who already have transit service or who have been in that planning process already have done the work in their last plan around defining what that station area is and then applying these densities. And for a lot of communities, you have a good baseline to start from for this next planning process. But certainly always happy to talk more with getting that right for you in your community and supporting that local planning process. Next slide, please. And then I've mentioned the Metropolitan Urban Service Area a couple of times on this slide deck, but staging development is really an important part of the planning process, and particularly in communities where service expansion around our wastewater services and local wastewater services is continuing to be part of your planning regime. Metropolitan Urban Service Area is the area within the 7-county metro region to which the regional wastewater system provides service or plans to provide service within the planning horizon. This area is established by communities through their comprehensive sewer plan, which is a part of your local comprehensive plan and is approved by the council as part of your local comprehensive planning process. Communities generally use development staging to identify the 10-year period during which specific land areas will develop and require newly provided wastewater service. For example, a community's 2040 plan would include a 2030 MUSA, which reflects the land area or areas available for new development between 2020 and 2030, and a 2040 MUSA, which reflects the land areas available for new development between 2030 and 2040. The council also identifies a long-term service area by planning beyond the 20-year planning horizon to accommodate growth further into the future. The size of a long-term service area depends on the maximum capacity of our wastewater treatment facility and is dictated by the size of the property in which the treatment facility is located, the amount of land area available for potential acquisition to expand that treatment facility, and the regulatory permit requirements for additional treatment processes and facility improvements and expansions. While that's not shown on this map, we do have other resources that do show that illustrative long-term service area, and that does fall within some of our cities, but generally falls in a lot more of our rural areas. These boundaries, or what is shown on those maps, as I mentioned, is illustrative only, but all of these boundaries are ultimately defined through the local comprehensive planning process by local governments as you are doing that work and working through identifying what works well for you. This is an area that we also have and need a lot of coordination with your cities in that work. The different connection points can have different meanings for our system and your system as well. And timing in some cases can be is also an important part of that coordination process. When a facility might become available or when infrastructure might become available so that the regional piece become available so that the local piece can be connected to that. At any rate, this is an important part of the coordination part of regional and local planning that we want to stress that while these lines are very specific, at the end of the day, these lines are not lines that the council developed, but really are driven by that local planning process. And as we move now into the 2050 process, then that staging will move out to 2050 MUSA, and that's where you'll see updated maps once that local planning process is completed. Next slide, please. Development of the 2050 Regional Development Guide will evaluate the existing MUSA, which we've done, and growth forecasts in the existing system to see if there are any regional changes to MUSA needed. We've gone through that process and made some additional changes there. And then we also do that at the request of local governments. For example, the City of Rogers requested that the council provide regional services to the city. And that's where we're taking over what was previously a locally owned wastewater treatment plant and regionalizing service. And we're currently in the process of building the new wastewater treatment plant there. That's decades worth of planning and coordination between the city and the council in that case. And that will have impacts around timing and availability of service or connections to service for all of those communities in the area that will be ultimately served by that regional wastewater facility. The existing treatment plant that was city owned will be decommissioned and service transferred to the new facility when it's ready and up and running. Other changes that can happen during the comprehensive planning process with communities helping to refine the MUSA in their own jurisdiction are really important and a kind of a core part of that and tied to your land use planning process. Communities can also request smaller changes as new developments are proposed in areas not included in their comp plan. And sometimes we see that happen, refinements with land swaps or other items occurring. And as new development and redevelopments happen that the city may not have been planning for, perhaps earlier than expected, the city can request for earlier service than previously expected. Those are areas where, again, we'd like to coordinate and ensure that that either we have the capacity available or we can make capacity available to support that. As communities identify other issues in their community, I mentioned earlier about some communities that may be fully within the MUSA might have neighborhoods that are not fully served or existing developments that are not yet connected to the system or have other issues that arise related to existing wastewater or private service that is occurring. They can request that connection to the regional system. It does take a lot of time and planning to make those connections happen. And we want to ensure that we can, again, continue. I think coordination is the key here, working through those issues with your community as you're identifying them so that we can ensure that those issues are addressed appropriately, that regional policies are being met, and that local goals are also accomplished. I think that you'll find that most of these areas of change are initiated by local governments and made in partnership with the council. And that's really how all of the work of the council is done. We really look for you to drive those issues, to identify them, and we are here to partner with you on identifying the best way to address them as we work forward. Next slide, please. I talked a lot about those minimum requirements and those foundational elements. But as I had started off, local plans played a really important role in your everyday decision-making in your community, even if there weren't a Met Council. Before I came to the Met Council, I was a local planner in Greater Minnesota. And even without having a requirement to do local comprehensive planning, the communities we worked in really valued the role that comprehensive plans could play in helping them to guide decision-making in their community. And you may have other local priorities that you want to address that are not identified as minimum requirements. And we really support and encourage you to think through how your plan can meet your community's needs. There may be areas of interest that your residents have identified through your planning process that you want to take on and address that are related to neighborhood issues or healthy communities or walkability, economic well-being, planning for an aging population, economic development, as I mentioned previously, or any other topics. We've seen really communities be inspirational in many ways in driving how responsive you are to your residents' needs and how you incorporate them into your local plan and identify strategies and actions for really addressing the issues that your community is raising locally. So really seeing this as an opportunity to also look back and what you might have said in your 2040 process as an important issue for your community to address, and that might be a really great start. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Angela for the next section. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. We'll talk now about the actual comprehensive plan review. We'll start with, state law outlines a really specific role for the council as it relates to reviewing comprehensive plans. This section will talk a little bit more about requirements just because we're reflecting what's in statute. We don't approve or deny plans, but we do authorize a plan to be put into effect. We do that through review and comment on whether or not the local plan carries out the development direction we've set to accommodate growth and densities in locations where regional infrastructure investments are planned or are in place. We do approve local sewer plans because obviously that's our system, and we do need to make sure that it's conforming to our plan for that system. Conformance, so there's different review standards based on which component we're reviewing. If it's a system plan, we're looking at conformance. If it's a policy plan, we're looking at consistency. And then overall, we look at compatibility. We'll talk a little bit more in detail about those 3 C's in a little bit. So let's look at the council's role in relationship to local comprehensive plans. We've mentioned that the council is responsible for planning for the overall development of the region, establishing the overall regional land use policies and planning related to the built environment. We're responsible for planning for regional infrastructure related to 3 systems: transportation, which includes highways, transit, light rail, also includes airports, as well as regional parks and trails, the wastewater system and the infrastructure investments involved in that system too, as well as planning for water supply. We develop a housing policy plan and plan for the needs of affordable housing. And there's an allocation of affordable housing for each community that's within, that has growth to accommodate affordable housing. New this cycle, the legislature added climate adaptation and mitigation requirements, and the council is responsible for setting expectations for comprehensive plans to address climate change. We also plan for natural systems protection and preservation and ensure that local plans have set expectations for their comp plan implementation, like identifying needs to update local controls like zoning and subdivision ordinances to be consistent with their new plan. As I mentioned, state law outlines a specific role for the council as it relates to reviewing local comprehensive plans. We don't approve or deny, but instead we review and comment. Local governments then adopt their authorized plan. And again, because of the direct impact to our system, we do approve local sewer plans. We can also, in certain circumstances, require communities to modify their plans. It's rare and only relates to impacts to the 3 regional systems. We didn't do any plan modifications. Well, I've been at the council for 13 years, and I've never been a part of plan modification at the council. So we do try to avoid those as much as possible. We work very hard toward shared solutions, negotiating kind of resolutions to any issues in a way that protects regional investments and still meets local development goals. Before submitting your comprehensive plan update, we encourage local governments to send their comprehensive plan to the council for preliminary review. This is completely optional. We offered this during the last round as well, but it's best done when the plan is distributed to adjacent and affected jurisdictions. We can identify any early red flags related to the system plans and help address those issues before the plan is formally submitted and a clock starts based on that submittal. Again, this is entirely optional. There are a few things, though, that local governments must do. Before submitting your plan, you must allow adjacent and affected jurisdictions to review and comment on your plan. This can include school districts, watershed organizations, state and federal agencies, park agencies, transit providers, commissions, and neighboring communities. We have provided a list on your community page of affected jurisdictions for your reference. However, you can add to that list if you find that it doesn't include everyone that you would like to include. All affected jurisdictions must submit comments, or the 6-month review period must expire before you can move forward. You do need to include their feedback and response to comments in your submission. You can submit earlier if all comments are received. You don't have to wait for the 6-month period to expire before you submit your plan if you've heard from everyone of your affected and adjacent jurisdictions. You also need to hold a public hearing. This is the only statutorily required engagement, but we know that local governments do extensive engagement with community early on in the process, throughout the process, and then usually the public hearing is kind of the last piece of it. Local governments need to take local action to submit their plan for council review, and that is done by resolution. I said I would talk more about conformance, consistency, and compatibility. We call these the 3 C's. There's actually a 4th C, and that's completeness. And it comes before all of these 3. Similar to a local development proposal that is submitted, you have to have all of the information you need in order to assess whether or not it's consistent with your zoning ordinance or subdivision ordinance or other local controls. And in the regional process, we also have a completeness standard. We need to make sure that we have the information that we need in order to assess conformance, consistency, and compatibility. This is where often the council may ask for supplemental information, and communities then provide answers to questions and things like that. Conformance really just relates to the 3 regional systems and does include aviation in the regional transportation system, as well as wastewater and regional parks and trails. This conformance determinations do result when a plan is more likely than not to have a substantial impact on or contain a substantial departure from metropolitan system plans. That's the language that's in statute, and this is where areas of conflict may require a potential plan modification, but again, that's very rare. We work through conformance issues very well with communities. Consistency relates to development policies. They're not at the level of regional system, and other agencies may be the authority in charge. The council identifies policy inconsistencies and encourages communities to change their plan. Policies can include surface water management, water supply, natural resources protection, and housing. We also coordinate with the DNR on Mississippi River Critical Corridor Area Plans, MRCA plans, for those that like acronyms. And then consistency also applies to really all planning laws. So, for example, the wild and scenic area may have development restrictions, and sometimes those are identified as an issue as well. Compatibility is where the council just ensures coordination between different communities because we review all of the plans, we have a probably broader view of what each community is doing. And of course, there's connections between communities, whether those are roadways or trails or other aspects of the landscape. And so here we may convene a meeting to have communities chat with one another, oftentimes just notifying the community that, hey, you might want to reach out to your fellow local government and have a conversation about this. It looks like there might be a misalignment there. But again, this is just a coordination effort that the council ensures. The council's review is extensive on comprehensive plans. As much work as goes into developing your local comprehensive plan, we want to make sure that we're respectful of that and do an extensive review that's cross-divisional. We use technical experts from across the council to review each policy area. That includes planners, forecast staff, policy experts, engineering staff, transportation and transit staff that review each plan. So there's 188 jurisdictions in the region. We review and read every single one of them. This takes a lot of coordination, I'm sure you can imagine, and we're working internally to ensure that there is training for reviewers and there's a consistent review approach. We want our responses to issues to be clear, coordinated, and consistent to ensure that there is, again, consistency with regional application of regional policy for all communities. Once a plan is submitted, there's an official review process. If you ever hear us talking about a clock or a timeline, this is kind of what we're referring to. Once a plan is submitted, the council has 120 calendar days to review and take action on that comprehensive plan. This is actually true plan amendments too, but those are usually much more quickly processed. So the plan reviews do take much longer, and we automatically extend to the 120 days for those comprehensive plan updates. So each community will submit a plan, and that initiates a 15 business day review period. You're familiar with this too. All government has to respond to a submittal within 15 business days. We're required to respond within that time frame unless the community submits supplemental information, which would then restart the timeline. We work with communities to answer questions and coordinate plan review. But once the plan is determined to be complete for review, from the date of submittal, the council staff then works to prepare a staff report. That takes about 10 business days to prepare and post before a committee meeting. Then we prepare and present to two committees of the council. The Community Development Committee hears every plan, and the Environment Committee hears most plans. Environment Committee is really only required if the community has a wastewater treatment facility, if it has a sewer plan that's connected to regional system. So that's only about 110 communities rather than the full 188. The full council must take action on the plan before the 120-day deadline. Just to be clear, this is a general timeline, and at times the CDC and Environment Committee could switch based on scheduling. We do try and make sure that we are as efficient as possible. So while we allow ourselves the 120-day review period for comp plan updates, we do try and get those done as quickly as feasible. So comprehensive planning process is really intense and complicated, and local governments spend a tremendous amount of time working on their comprehensive plans. And there's a lot of supports that we put in place to help as much as possible with at least the minimum requirements. The council, we know this is a substantial effort, and so providing technical assistance is key to that. And we start with the regional policy development, forecasts, and system statements that Lisa showed you at the beginning of the presentation that kicks off the planning process. We hope that you're well acquainted with your sector representative. There's a sector representative for every community in the region, and it's made up of a team of really experienced former local planners that provide one-on-one assistance to local staff. One of the biggest pieces of technical assistance we provide is a local planning handbook. We'll talk about that again in a second. And then tools and resources for every planning requirement. We also have a planning grant program and a new small communities planning program to help the smallest communities in the region with direct planning support. And then the PlanIt program helps with training and educational efforts to complete the comp plans. We'll talk a little bit more about some of these. First thing we encourage local government to do is to start with a local planning handbook. This has existed in several forms over the past 2 planning cycles. This handbook has been completely refreshed to reflect Imagine 2050 policy and planning requirements. There are 8 required plan elements in the comprehensive plans, and the handbook walks you through each of those, focusing on providing assistance needed to develop a plan based on your local vision, yet remaining consistent with regional policies. The handbook is designed to be a one-stop shop, so everything can be found in your handbook and with your sector rep. So those 2 resources should help you the most. The handbook is designed to support communities with the updates, to provide clear guidance, to focus on minimum requirements. There are tools, maps, resources, and other technical assistance within it. There is a focus on meeting the minimum requirements in the handbook, but we also want to help you get more out of your plan. So going beyond the minimum requirements, there's a variety of planning issues in communities that aren't part of the requirements. Lisa mentioned that earlier, and we try to provide resources for those efforts as well. I want to encourage you to check out your community page to find community-specific information and checklists. We've built in training and resources too that not only meet the minimum requirements, but go beyond that as well. Our education and training program for local planning staff, well, it's open and free for everyone, but it is focused on local planners as the primary audience. That program is called PlanIt. This program was initially implemented in 2016, went through about 20 months through the beginning of 2018, and then we relaunched it early this year. In fact, we have a variety of events and resources, all free and focused on local planners. That includes webinars, workshops, and a full day planning conference, which is later this year. And we also provide, as part of this program, free professional development certification maintenance to local planners, free events, all local here in the region to support your local planning staff. So we know that data informs so much of the planning process, and we've developed a series of tools to help navigate a variety of topics. We have an interactive housing tool and a toolbox to help meet housing requirements, a natural systems mapping tool called Metro Mosaic to help, again, meet your minimum requirements for natural systems planning, a climate action toolkit full of strategies to help meet your climate requirements, and also a greenhouse gas emissions reduction tool, which will help with some of, again, those new planning requirements for climate, some of which discuss specifically emissions, and you can develop and customize a report for your own community using that tool. We will also have training available for each of these tools and walk through demonstrations in various places, some through the PlanIt program, some at conferences, and other places. We can come out to your community if you would like us to and talk through any of these tools as well. So we do try and communicate about all of these tools as much as possible.